It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Howdy, hello there. Welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show. It's me, Douglas Coleman. How are you? No time to chit-chat. 2 interviews, full show. This is the Cruel Hearts special. Cruel Hearts is the name of the film that we are promoting. Thank you to Tim from New Ocean Media for setting this all up for us. It's a great film. If you're stuck at home like most of us are, check it out. It's available on all the usual streaming outlets. And it's very good. It's a psychological thriller. Keeps you on the edge of your seat until the very end. I have with me today Marion Kerr, who's one of the lead actors, and also Paul Osborne, who is the writer-director. So, lots to get to. We will be right back with Marion Kerr, followed by Paul Osborne.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy, right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of the Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Are you an independent musician? How would you like to have your songs played on hundreds of radio stations just like the one you're listening to right now? Join MusicSubmit.com and we'll promote your music to radio stations and blogs in your genre. It's free to set up your account, and we guarantee your music will be considered for airplay by radio stations worldwide. Why not sign up today? It's free. MusicSubmit.com. Radio promotion for indie musicians.
Hurry, Bullwinkle! The show's about to start!
I'm coming as fast as I can.
And now...
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat.
Again?
Nothing up my sleeve. Presto! Ooh, don't know my own strength.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Marion Kerr. Hi, Marion. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. Let's see. Are you in L.A.?
I am in LA, yeah.
So what's going on over there? Because we're in Vegas and, we get the news like everyone else, but I don't think we're quite as under as severe of a lockdown as you guys probably are. So what is the deal? You're just not allowed to go out at all unless you got to buy food?
Well, I mean, kind of. We're sort of, like all the terminology, it's like we're in a sort of mandatory self-isolation. It's basically, like you're only supposed to go out, like you can go out for like a walk around the block or go to the grocery store to get like essentials. Or if you have a job that is considered an essential service, you can go do that. As an actor, I do not fall in that category. So, basically, I don't really see my friends. You don't go out. Like all restaurants, bars, and all that are shut down, except for if you want to Postmates it. Aside from that, I mean, the only person I'm kind of recently that I saw was a friend of mine is a doctor, and he's also a single parent, and so he's starting to do night shifts, and he needs help, like watching his kids, because he's like, so we've been sort of trying to help him out with that, but yeah, basically kind of all the regular things like auditions and meeting a friend for a drink and all that kind of stuff is all kind of done right now.
Everybody's life pretty much has been put on hold by this virus. And I think it's not something that I've ever lived through. I think that this will be something people are going to remember for a long time. Because I know in LA, you guys sort of have your fill of natural disasters that happen, earthquakes and fires and landslides and all that. But those are sort of local. The people that are in Iowa, they don't really have a reality for it. But this is something that's affected everybody.
Yeah, and, obviously, to be honest, I've never seen anything where it's just stopped my industry full stop, like just stop. Like everything's kind of stopped. And I've never experienced that. I mean, obviously, I have friends that, they can still do their job. They're just doing it from home. So for them, their lives hasn't really been interrupted. It's just had to be adjusted. But I think it just totally depends on where you live and what industry you work in.
Well, that's true. And I think most industries are non-essential at this point. I mean, unless you're medical professionals or police or fire or something like that.
Right, but clearly for a lot of private businesses, they're able to make that adjustment where because of the internet, like a lot of people can work from home.
Right.
So there are some industries that I have friends that are just they're doing their exact same jobs, they're getting the exact same paycheck, they're just doing it at home. Whereas other people I know, they can't do their job from home, like that's not an option. So yeah, it's just obviously the effect it's had has been quite varied.
Well, what's interesting for me is that my business is booming as a result of this, because I think everybody is in lockdown and they can't do anything, so they might as well do an interview because it's certainly safe enough.
Well, that's why I'm here.
It's certainly safe enough to get on the phone and talk to somebody, So
it feels safe. It does feel safe.
Yeah. So I've been getting emails like crazy. The show has been, and we can't keep up with it. I'm only one guy, so I think we've got enough bookings for the next 3 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
True. That's good. But also in the sense too that you'll obviously get to speak a lot of people, about their experiences with this whole thing. So I imagine you're hearing a whole range of stories.
Yeah, I mean, we're just getting the bookings now of when it got serious, and so it will be interesting to hear what people have. I have not come across anybody yet who has been tested positive, thank God. So,
okay, that's good.
I don't know if that's going to happen or not. I hope not. But if we do get somebody who's tested positive, at least it'll be information for people to hear.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and just, everybody's sort of daily life. Are you stocked up on toilet paper?
Well, I found that I haven't seen toilet paper in a grocery store in, like 3 weeks, I think. But I discovered that my local liquor store apparently sells toilet paper, which I did not know.
Wow.
And so that's my secret stash where I'm going to get my toilet paper because, like, a grocery store, like a CVS, like, forget about it. I've long since given up on that.
Oh, yeah, and like Walmart, I mean, they just wiped out a toilet paper. The whole aisle is gone.
Yeah, but I've heard people are finding it kind of in covert places. Like, some of my friends are like, have you guys ever bought a toilet paper at a 7-Eleven? They got tons of this stuff. And I'm like, oh, yeah, good point. No one's ever buying toilet paper at the 7-Eleven. What they do? So,
what I find interesting too is that it only seems like it's in America that people have this real panic buying of toilet paper when things like this happen, because in Europe and in Asia they don't, and they have hordes of toilet paper. And I think what's going to happen is after this virus, I predict that after this virus, the sale of bidets is going to skyrocket in the United States.
That's very funny. Yeah. I mean, people seem to have a real fear of being without toilet paper. It's not my fear, but apparently it's a very strong fear that I did not realize until this happened.
I think people are going to have bidets installed in every room in the house after this. I think that's what's going to happen.
Just so they'll never live in such fear again.
Absolutely. Well, okay, so let's change tones here. Why don't you just tell us a little about your background? Because the bio that I got for you was 3 lines long. Didn't really cover much. So
Okay.
why don't you just tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll talk about the movie.
Yeah, sure. I'm an actor and a writer who live in Los Angeles. I'm originally from Sacramento, and I came to Southern California when I went to college at UC Irvine in Orange County. And then I lived in London for a little bit, and then came back and finished up my degree. And then, everyone sort of had to decide whether they were going to kind of move to New York or LA, and I decided to move to LA because film and TV was sort of more my interest. And I've been here ever since. And, I've been lucky enough to work in a lot of different films and TV shows and commercials, and one of them, I like working in independent film a lot, just because especially the film that we'll talk about, the storytelling is just so interesting and so different, and I like kind of, my favorite medium to work in is feature films, and you can have just kind of this amazing collaboration with all kinds of different people, and you all go off to like this amazing film camp and work on this movie for a month, and and then go back to your lives. I've gone to a lot of film festivals, and at one of those film festivals is where I met Paul Osborne, who was the writer and director of Cruel Hearts, the film that we're going to talk about, I think.
Yes, absolutely. Now, are you which do you prefer, being an actor or being a writer?
I definitely think of myself as an actor first, definitely. I think writing kind of came about more, just kind of out of necessity in the early days when I first moved out here. There's sort of the figuring out, my degree was essentially a theater degree. I think I had one film acting class maybe. So, when I kind of came out here, there was so much to figure out. I had worked, kind of done so much theater work in school that, when I came to LA, I just wanted to keep working and keep doing stuff. And so initially it just kind of was born out of starting to write sort of things, little short films, little one-night things to do with my friends to kind of just keep our creative juices flowing. And then as I kind of start going through the business a bit more, I think I've always liked writing, but I would meet a lot of directors who really didn't like to write, and they would only write out of necessity to make their own projects. But they didn't really love it, like their heart wasn't really in it. So I started collaborating with them, and I would write things that sometimes I would be in, sometimes I wouldn't be in, and I just kind of started to doing a lot more of it. And it's another kind of storytelling that I really enjoy. I really enjoy writing all kinds of genres and formats, and so it's just something that I've kind of now really just gotten used to. But I think definitely when I think of myself, I definitely think of myself as an actor primarily.
Is there more reward as an actor or less criticism perhaps? Because I know the story that I hear from writers.
Less criticism as an actor? Are you kidding?
Well, the reason I say that is because writers, particularly screenwriters that I've spoken with, who have gone through the mill of a major studio, said that, oftentimes what they've submitted doesn't come out the other end at all resembling what they submitted. That by the time it's gone through its fourth and fifth and sixth draft, and, that it was very frustrating for them. I mean, the money was nice, but it was very frustrating for them to have their story so radically altered to suit the studio. Would you find that similarly with acting or not? Because acting, you pretty much have a part to play, and I suppose if you get it, you can do your own spin on it. But, I mean, isn't there less creative input directly as an actor or not?
Well, I mean, I think they're almost kind of two different questions. I think that, the idea of, what you submitted versus what actually comes out in the final product, I find obviously a precise parallel with being a film actor, because so often, I've watched myself on film and TV, and I'm like, oh, that's what they did? That's the editing choices they made? That's what my character's doing now? And It's not what I felt on the day, or what I felt was the take where I was like, oh, nailed it, got it, that's the thing. And then they pick a completely different take, or they edit it in such a way where, this nuance is taken out, or this, or, and so, obviously, a lot can be done with an actor's performance through editing. So, very often what I, kind of what you think you've done. And then when you come see the final product a few weeks, few months, few years later, you're like, oh, that's different. Okay, good to know, and it's not necessarily a terrible thing. It's just, it's up to somebody else. It's their show, and you're just kind of a cog in it. I think much like the screenwriter. So in that sense, I think that there's a lot of parallels. I think on the other side, though, I think ultimately depending, probably in any project really, it is just how much collaboration is there. I think obviously if I'm doing a play, you have to collaborate with everybody, but when the lights go up and the play opens, like, it's the actor's show, like the director
Right.
can't come in and stop, and there is no editor, and there is no, so depending on the medium, that kind of, I think, determines, and I think obviously it's different for a studio film versus an independent film, whether you're self-financed or studio financed. I think kind of really depending on the medium sort of determines what your level of control is. And I think if you haven't kind of made your peace with that pretty early on, then, then it's going to be, I think it's going to be pretty tough.
Well, you're right about the editing. That definitely can change the way the actor appears to the audience versus you doing it yourself. Like you said, you could have thought, oh, I did it
Right.
perfectly this way and gave off this impression. And then when they're done editing, you didn't give off that impression at all. It was something completely different.
Or just having whole scenes cut, having whole scenes that you're like, oh, well, this totally explains why I'm like this in this other scene, and then that whole scene's gone. So now you just this is like inexplicable, and or whatever, But those choices are made because of runtime or whatever. The scene didn't work or whatever, all of which hopefully has everything to do with the story and almost nothing to do with you. But since you're just kind of focusing on your part, again, those things can be very like, oh, that's not what I thought was going to happen, but okay, here we go.
You do have a much better command as an actor when you're live on stage,
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an actor's medium, yeah, because,
Right.
once like I said, once the train leaves the station, like it's just you guys, that's it.
You gotta go.
In all the good ways and in all the bad ways.
So you worked on Criminal Minds. Were you a writer or an actor in that?
No, yeah, I was an actor in that.
Okay. I haven't seen that show in many years, but were you?
Yeah, that was like one of the first kind of week-long guest spots that I ever did, where I was like one of many victims of some, I don't know if he was a serial killer. I guess he was kind of a serial killer, I suppose, serial killer for the episode. And he's doing all the sort of medical experimentation. And he actually cut off another girl's leg and cut off my leg and put her leg on my leg in some sort of effort to, he's trying to help his wife who is missing her leg. And so he's just kind of, keeps doing these insane medical experiments, people that he's kidnapping in his garage. And luckily my character makes it for the most of the part of the episode and, escapes and gets to fight him and the FBI gets to save her and all this ridiculously juicy stuff. It was pretty fun.
Oh, well, that's good then, because you could have had as your credit dead body, and
I know, right?
yeah. So at least you got to speak.
Well, I got to
move.
say, when I first read the sides, I was like, oh, this is not going to end well for this character. And then in the end, I was like, oh, but maybe.
So do you have a favorite from that show that you liked working with, or were they all great?
Yeah, everybody was really, I mean, the most part, I was mostly locked in a garage for the whole week. And so
okay.
the main person that I worked with that week, who was the, sort of the mad scientist, was the actor Ray Wise from Twin Peaks. And I, was a big Twin Peaks fan. And so I was just mainly very excited to work with him the whole time. And, be as scared of him as possible. And he's just the nicest man and, does nothing but, tell jokes and keep everything very light. And, it was a lot of fun.
So your character in this film, Cruel Hearts, had something that I think is very funny, and it's a technique or a situation, I suppose, that is used in comedy quite a bit. Misplaced priorities. And I always find that to be particularly funny, and you did it very well. So,
Thank you.
and this is not going to be a spoiler. So it's one of those situations where somebody is drowning and they're worried about getting their shoes wet, and
Totally.
your character was very much on that plane. And I laughed during that scene because she just was relentless about getting blood on her shirt.
Yeah, well, it's a nice shirt, so it would just be an epic tragedy for the shirt to get ruined.
Well, and then the line about this shirt costs more than your car, and I just loved it. I thought, oh, this is great. This is so perfect.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably true. That was one of the things I enjoyed the most about when I got the script for Cruel Hearts is I sort of probably like a lot of actors, those kind of characters that have very similar characteristics that I've played quite often. And when I read Cruel Hearts, almost none of that I had ever done or ever really applied to me. And so I was so excited. I agree with you. Misplaced priorities is one of my favorite things in characters, especially when it's not, you're not winking at it at all. It's not sort of tongue in cheek. It's not like, oh, how funny am I right now? It's like, no, she really means it. The only thing she is stressed out about having this guy who's, bleeding out of his face is like if it's going to get on her shirt, and it's like makes her real nervous for the day. Not like what his fate will ultimately be or anything else, but just like seriously with the shirt, like I need you not. Yeah, that was that kind of. I love films that have a very black sense of humor, which you don't really kind of come across too often, I feel. And Cruel Hearts had that in spades, and was one of the things I enjoyed most about it.
There was a scene in Goodfellas that it reminded me of, and I'm sure you've seen the film Goodfellas, yeah?
Yeah.
There was the scene where they were at Henry's bar and Joe Pesci meets up with Billy Batts, and they get into it, and then in the end, Joe Pesci comes back and kills Billy Batts right in the bar. And while they're trying to clean up the body, he's apologizing to Henry, saying, "I didn't want to get blood on your floor." And it just sort of reminded me, when you did that scene, all I could think of was that scene. Because that's
very funny.
I laughed during that scene. I thought, well, wow, he's worried about getting blood on the floor after he just beat this guy.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
That's also the first and last time anybody has ever compared me to Goodfellas or anything I've ever done to Goodfellas. So I'm going to enjoy this moment right now.
Well, I bet you nobody has said you reminded me of Joe Pesci. I bet nobody's ever said that to you.
No, never. So, interview first. Well done, you.
There you go. So what else are you working on? Well, nothing, I guess, at the moment. Do you have anything?
Well, right? That's the thing. It was like, this was sort of traditional pilot season in LA time. So, I was going out doing, making the rounds, doing my thing. And then it was like, record scratch. So, I'm obviously trying to kind of, figure out a bunch of things, right now. But yeah, obviously, I'm starting to kind of look at projects that I had started writing or, had not, had sort of completed, but, I'm like, oh, maybe that's not really ready. And so I'm starting to kind of readjust my use of time. And obviously writing is something that I can, easily do and doesn't really require the outside world to work for me to do it. So I definitely think I'll be focusing more on that for the foreseeable future.
You're lucky that you could do writing. Because now it's the perfect opportunity, because a lot of writers that I know do everything they can to try to shut the outside world out while they're writing.
Yeah.
And
that is definitely true for me. Yeah.
And it's shut itself off for you. So I think,
I know.
The opportunity is there.
Awkward thank you?
Yeah. Awkward thank you. That's a good way to put it. So we do have to wrap this up. Thank you so much for coming on. This was a lot of fun. I hope this film does well. Is the film out now? Did it make it out?
It is. Yeah, it came out. Yeah, it came out in February on VOD, Blu-ray, and some theaters, which obviously is again not a thing anymore.
Not happening.
But it's right. But for everybody that's self-isolating right now, it's available on iTunes and Amazon and all the places online. So it's a really fun film noir thriller that's kind of scary and funny and great writing and a great cast, and I think it's a really enjoyable film.
Oh, one last question. What was the name of the guy? I'll just say the guy, because that seems to be who he was. What is his name? The actor's name?
The actor's name, Alev Aiden.
Okay, and because he looked really familiar, but I just couldn't place.
I don't know what you would have seen him in. I mean, all the cast has done a ton of work in a ton of different places, and so. But I think Paul has a really good eye for casting and for actors, and kind of finding people who, like everyone is very kind of. Sort of, it's like kind of putting together, not that everybody is necessarily like a character actor, but putting together people that are kind of very specific types, all kind of smashed together in this big ensemble film. I think he does that really well, and and Love's great in the film.
No, the cast was terrific, but I couldn't place him. I was like, wait a minute, he's like a cross between.
Who's that guy?
He's in some scenes he reminds me of Ed Norton with a beard.
I could see that.
Yeah, and then in other scenes he was not. So I just couldn't.
Oh, okay.
I was like, beating
well,
you
got to grill Paul about that, and maybe you guys can figure it out.
Yeah. All right, Marion. Thanks so much for coming on. Stay safe, and hope you get some writing.
You too, Douglas. Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, this is John Morgan, production supervisor for DJC Productions. And you're listening to The Douglas Coleman Show.
Okay, please welcome my guest, Paul Osborne. Hey, Paul, how are you?
How are you doing?
Doing just fine. I got to ask the obligatory question of the elephant in the room. How are you faring with the virus situation, and are you locked in, shut in?
Yeah, I'm locked in, shut in. Actually, this is day 14 for me of being. So far so good. I think I'm more geared for it than most. For whatever reason. I just, I was a latchkey kid when I was a kid and only child. And so and I'm actually fortunate enough that I can work from home. I was already set up for it. So the transition was pretty easy. I'm just real lucky that, so far no symptoms, set up for it, mentally kind of, geared this way. I know for a lot of people, it's pretty tough. And a lot of people, like people who are, medical professionals and also people just in the food industry and police and fire and it's a lot of people can't stay home and have to continually be on the front line and also people who are able to stay home but lost their jobs. I mean, especially in the film industry, this is a gig economy. So I'm aware of how lucky I am.
Well, I just kind of had this conversation with Marion, and for people who are writers, I mean, this is sort of the environment you want. You don't want it because of this reason, and that's it. So we called it the awkward thank you, because I know a lot of writers who just want to try to shut out the rest of the world so they can concentrate on what they're doing. Well, now the world has sort of shut them out.
Yeah, the world shut off.
Right.
But I think a lot of people are having this struggle where they're like, oh, I have all this time to write, but they're, concerned about making their rent, about making their mortgage, about, their health, or about what's going to, how long this is going to last, and all the various things that come along with, an apocalypse. And so a lot of people are themselves, creatively stunted, not in a position to write, too preoccupied with other things, and they can't let their minds go. And, expected to go on for a couple of months, and a lot of the stuff you can let go of. It takes a little while, but I know some people are really struggling, and they feel like they're putting a lot of pressure on themselves to be writing now, or they don't feel like they're in the position to do so, and or they don't feel mentally like they can. And I think it's important that if you are one of those people who is a creative, a musician, a painter, a writer, someone who can work out of their home and do it themselves, animator, and you feel like you should be working and you find you're kind of stunted creatively because all the stress of what's going on. I think the thing to remember is you don't have to. Like when you're a writer, not writing is also part of the writing process. Taking time to go and couch potato and Netflix it and just relax and reset the batteries, because in order to be creative, really you have to have a sense of relaxation, a sense of ease, to let things come to you, let things occur to you. If you get clamped down, being I have to be creative right now, you can't do it. It's like there has to be a relaxation and a freedom to it. There's a sense of play, an element, and it's important in creating. And if you're not free to play, so if you can, I mean, great. But if you feel you can't, it's okay too. Like it's okay to not be okay right now.
Well, I agree. And I mean, this is not the best circumstance. This is not the writer who you jumped on a plane and went to some top of a mountain to get away from everything to clear his head so he could write. I mean, this was something that was sort of imposed on the whole world, and it's not very nice, and people are dying. So I agree with you. And you also brought up another point that I want to bring up. I had a guest on, a few months ago. He was a staff writer at A&M Records at one time. And that always amused me because as a musician and a songwriter myself, I could never do that. I could never just, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, I'm going to write songs. But that's exactly what he did. And I said, how in the world could you do that? Because something has to spark me to get me going, to get that inspiration to click, and then you build on it, so forth. And what you just said about, the environment, the way it is now, it might not be conducive for everybody to just say, I'm going to write starting now. Too much stress, too much other stuff going on in the world. So I always wondered about people like him who could just do it as a 9 to 5 job. How are you as far as writing? Can you do it like that? Or do you have to something has to motivate you? Something has to spark it?
Well, it depends. I mean, there's two different kinds of, we talk about assembly line art. There's two ways it can go about it. If you are on your own and you are writing your own thing, then I think is a level of inspiration that's needed, because you have to have something that sparks to make you want to push. But if you're handed something, there's a very different situation where if you're handed something, say, we have an assignment for you, we need you to write a Hallmark Christmas movie, and the premise is that Santa Claus's daughter is going to go to college, then it's easier. Then at that point, at least I know for me, I can sit down and I can work something out. Now, it's not going to be the most inspired thing necessarily. It might be, once you get going. But if you are being given an assignment, like your friend at the company was probably probably like, hey, you got to write us a love song for this artist. This is the style, blah, 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 blah. And they're giving you a box to paint in. That's much easier to do on a 9 to 5 than it is to go, you can do anything. What's your heart song? It's a very different deal. I can write on assignment without much needing to find myself and center. I can just this is the assignment, this is the box of painting, and I can move forward because some of the work's already been done in a sense. And there's art and then there's craft, and they both work together. But craft I can summon. There's the old saying that inspiration is a luxury of the novice. That's what that means. If I'm isolated and I'm like, okay, well, come up with the new great, come out of this quarantine with the great American novel. Well, that's a much tougher situation. And what's funny, a friend of mine was talking about this, like how many films are going to come out of this? Like how many films that next year's Sundance are going to all be about people who met cute and were quarantined together, or all these quirky love stories, starring sitcom actors at the Sundance Lab, but are all about people that things that happened during quarantine. It's kind of funny. It's like they're always like, that's what's going on. And it is funny, like you watch television now, you watch Netflix or whatever, and everything seems so different. You know, I was flipping channels last night. I was looking Sideways, the old Paul Giamatti movie, you know, where they do a wine tasting, and they're in a winery, and they're just all, you know, being poured wine. This is a Syrah, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, that's unthinkable right now. It's unthinkable right now to be in a room with a bunch of other people, and they're pouring with their bare hands a liquid drink in a glass they handed you. Oh my God! Like, it's such an unthinkable, you know. And hopefully in a year it won't be unthinkable again. But it's funny, you know. It's hard to come up with a story when the world is suddenly changed. And there's an instinct I think people have. Animals have this too. I think every conscious creature has this thing that what's happening now is going to go on forever. That's why we always look for the light at the end of the tunnel, because we have a sense that what's happening right now is going to, I have this headache. Oh my God, when will it ever end? It's going to go on. We emotionally feel, even though we can consciously understand that something isn't going to go on forever, that things are going to change, you know, for better or worse. Like, if you're happy now, you're going to be sad at some point in the future. If you're sad now, you're going to be happy at some point in the future. With this, it's tough because we don't have an end date. And people do like, oh, is this the new normal? People refer to it as the new normal. Like, it's not the new normal. There's no way it's not the new normal. It's going to pass. And there will be changes to the way we live probably after it passes, and there will be psychological things to deal with even longer than that. But it will pass. It's funny, like it's hard to look past it right now and be creative and think, what kind of tale could I tell that doesn't take place with just me and my wife in four walls?
Well, it's interesting because there have been moments in history that I like to call a mankind reset, where from that time forward, things were different. Now, they could be different in a little bit or in a lot, depending on how you want to perceive it. I think this is going to be a similar event, that from this day forward, things will not be the same again. We will get back to our normal lives, but there will be changes and things that have, you know, that we used to do that we probably just won't do anymore.
Sure.
It's different than nuclear war, okay? Because this isn't something that it was necessarily deliberately perpetrated. I mean, there are the tinfoil hat guys who said that this was a virus created in a biochemical lab.
Right.
Blah,
No,
blah,
no.
Blah. Okay, but
no.
Assuming
the response was man-made, though. The response was man-made. So you could argue that for days. But yeah, no, the thing itself, this is what happens. It's been predicted for a while that we would have some kind of new pandemic situation, which is why we had the pandemic response team in place that was disbanded. So for cost reasons. But yeah, no, this is true. This is a nature event, if you will.
Okay, right. A natural disaster, for lack of a better term. But it's on a global scale. You know, one of the things I brought up with Marion as well is that people who live in Southern California are quite used to natural disasters occurring on a regular basis, probably more than in any other part of the country, because you get everything. You get the landslides, you get the earthquakes, you get the fires.
Right.
And, people have to hunker down and deal with particular issues. But it's regional. The people that are in the Midwest and the East Coast, they don't have much of an affinity for that. The one thing with this is that there isn't really a part of the world that has been untouched by it. And at some point...
No, it's true.
It's going to unite us, I hope, because that's always been my theory, is that the best and fastest way to unite the world is if the Martians were to suddenly invade, because then we would point all our guns up into the sky rather than each other. I don't know if this is going to be the same thing or not.
Well, I don't know. I mean, what's interesting is we're so mired in humanity as humans, as social creatures that interact with other humans and primarily think about other humans. We think about it as everybody, and we see the tiny differences. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like, if aliens came to Earth and look at people, we all look the same around the world. They would, like when we look at cats. They're different colors, but they're all cats. we would look at us and go, well, okay, they're all pretty much the same around the globe, but they don't see any smaller differences. We see small differences as giant differences, and we react to them that way. It's absolutely true. It's like, so you know, I think as a global community, we've been growing more homogenous over the last century, you know, especially as we've been able to, you know, get everywhere. And I think even the next generation, like my kids, it's funny, like when I was in, you know, like second or third grade, we had to write a pen pal letter to someone in France, like it was required. And we would, like, you know, write a letter, Jacques, and it was this awkward, hello, how are you?
Right.
I am Paul, I live in California. And then you send it in, and then you get one back, one back. And it would be like, je m'appelle Jacques, you know, and blah, blah, blah. And it was just totally still the thing, and that would be the end of it. Whereas my son, this morning, he's 9, he was playing Fortnite on his computer, on the PlayStation, with and he has a speaker in there, and a mic and everything else, and he's talking to some kid with an Indian accent from somewhere in the globe, and they're chatting for an hour while they trade weapons and shoot bad guys.
Oh yeah.
And it's so that's, you know, as we've become, you know, as telecommunications go, as borders sort of become more arbitrary. I mean, there's definitely cultural things, but we are, you know, the best picture winner of the Oscars this year was a picture from South Korea. But what's funny is that I'm a member of the Writers Guild, and in the Writers Guild, you know, Writers Guild of America, we're allowed to vote on the awards, but only ones that are registered with the Writers Guild of America. And Parasite, a South Korean movie, was a Writers Guild of America film, meaning the screenplay was registered in the United States with the Writers Guild, and then that money was, and then domestic money was used, like from an American company, from Neon, to help make this movie in South Korea. That's a real international idea. The fact that film doesn't really, I mean, it takes place in South Korea, and it's got a primarily South Korean cast and filmmakers, but it's also an American film. And it's just, that's the thing, like the lines are getting blurred. And I think as the next generation grow up, and it becomes less and less of a big deal where you are, and they become more and more globally minded and less myopic about the region they're in physically, we are going to see, I think, the world come together, you know, over the longer curve. We do have pendulums back where people become xenophobic and are suddenly afraid of the other because they're there. It's like, but that goes away. Like that's the natural ebb and flow of it. But over the longer curve, we go towards, you know, homogeny.
Well, that's very true. And you mentioned cats, and I'm going to mention dogs because I have 2 of them. These 2, in terms of physical appearance, are about as opposite as you can get. One is a full-bred German Shepherd, 115 pounds, and the other one is a half Shih Tzu, half Poodle, who's maybe 10 pounds. And the funniest thing is that the Poodle is the older one, so he always demands respect from the German Shepherd, who the German Shepherd we got as a puppy, they started out at the same size, only the German Shepherd grew 8 times to the size of the Poodle. The funniest part about it is a dog is a dog is a dog, because to them, the hierarchy is simply because one is older and one was in the house first. It makes no difference, right, the size, the strength. So they've already got that part down, and I don't think we do as a race of people. I don't think we quite grasp that concept yet. Not entirely. But the dogs have had that for forever. So, I mean, they definitely one up on us as far as that's concerned.
Well, I think dogs tend to be, thankfully, more accepting. We have 2 cats. They're both orange, and they hate each other. So, I don't know. Let me tell you. But you know, it's like we see huge differences. It's really strange. But they aren't. They're very small. Like, you know, between men and women too. Like, we really focus on the differences between men and women, and men and women aren't different really. Very small, very minor. tweaks to man to woman, woman to man, but we see them as these huge chasms, and women are all like this, and men are all like this, and that's not true. No,
at the end of the day, it's not. And sometimes it takes something like this pandemic to kind of beat people over the head with this idea, that we are all human.
We'll see.
And, if there's something good to be gotten out of this, maybe it'll be that. Maybe it'll be one step closer.
I think there's a few silver linings. One of them is environmental. Is that with less planes flying and less cars driving?
Oh yeah, the air is very clean right now.
The dolphins have returned to the canals of Venice or whatever. It's like and I think also like the dogs. Back dogs again. Dogs are loving this, man. Here's the humans around all the time.
Oh yeah. We're not leaving them for 8 hours a day.
Having a great time. My kid playing video games all day and getting to learn on school on a computer. He's thrilled. So I think I'd like to see his friends physically, but there's definitely some benefits. Same time, there's always economic pressure to reopen stuff, which is silly because it's going to make it worse, and it's going to be economically worse. Like Liberty University is going to reopen their campus. It's nuts.
Yeah, too soon. Yeah,
so,
too soon.
Yeah, it's way too soon, and it's like, okay, well, that's not a good idea, and so. I think we're going to see, the United States culturally is very different in different parts of it. And we're going to see, I think, some areas that are having a worse time with this than others. More densely populated areas are going to get hit hard. They already are.
Oh, yeah.
But we're going to see areas, but the responses in those areas have been very, steadfast. And I think we're going to see areas where they were kind of ignoring the problem bloom the other direction and get really bad, whereas areas where they've been really dealing with it are going to get better. An example is that California had a really, really quick rise, obviously, very densely populated area, right where people came from China, where it was all coming in, boom. But the self-quarantining, the stay, safer at home policies, all those things clicked into effect pretty fast. Not fast enough, but they've been pretty like, here's the line of the sand, boom, we're doing them, and they've been very steadfast about maintaining them. And we're seeing the progression in California slow. Like it's doubling every 2 days countrywide. It's doubling every 5 days in California. It's a much slower pace because people are doing the self-isolating and taking it more seriously. Not everybody, but like they're LA just announced that if you're running a non-essential business and you're not complying with the shutdown, they're going to cut your power off.
I saw that. Yeah.
Like you won't be able to function. And they're doing that because like you have to honor this. This is a big life and death situation. So that will be interesting. I'm hoping that Liberty University reconsiders. It's possible because of the lack of testing in this country and because of the response, and we're going to see it, and because of the way this thing accelerates, you're going to see a massive increase in the next week of confirmed cases and of critical cases. It's going to really balloon, and I think a lot of people in charge who are ready to reopen are going to reconsider. They're going to go, oh, you know what? Never mind. It's not under control like we thought it might be. What we're seeing now, the cases we're seeing now are from 2 weeks ago. That's what's important to remember.
Right.
And it went unchecked. It went unchecked in this country for 2 months. You remember that South Korea had the first confirmed case the same day we had the first confirmed case. And they're back to normal. Like they've completely contained it.
Right.
So it has to do with the response.
Yeah.
And back to your point, we feel impervious. And we've been very, lucky in this country to be spared a lot of natural disasters, spared a lot of, things that we see around the world. And we feel like we're invincible a little bit. And I think that, one of the positives that may come out of this is that we realize that we're not. We take things a little more seriously and function a little more carefully going forward.
I would hope so. I would hope after this that maybe we are a little bit more precautious. Just on some minute level that we can feel that maybe we're not quite as invincible as we like to think we are.
I mean, that's the hope. The problem with this particular situation is that if it was a zombie apocalypse and you were an idiot, it's a hoax. it's not as bad as it is, and you go outside, you get eaten. You're done.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, that's. I
But
suppose
now,
that's Darwin.
With this, you don't get eaten because you infect 25,000 other people that also get eaten. So, you know, and everybody else was hiding, have to wait longer to get out.
You want to talk about your film? Since we've
hey, I got a movie.
Yeah.
We have, what, 6 minutes left in the interview? Something like that.
Oh, that's all right.
Yeah. Let's talk about the film. It's called Cruel Hearts. It's available on iTunes, Amazon, Vudu, Google Play, YouTube rentals, every pay-per-view flavor known to man. It's out there. It's on Blu-ray, DVD. So you can see it. You can totally get a hold of it. That's out there.
I just watched it about an hour before I got on the interview with you, and I really liked it. Since you're the writer-director, I can kind of talk a little bit about the story. And since I've done interviews for so many years with filmmakers and writers and film producers, and there's a crafty way you can talk around a story where it doesn't spoil it, and all it does is actually inspire people to go see it, because we talk about it since we've both seen it, and they don't know what we're talking about, but they want to go see it now to find out what we were talking about. So
right, and this particular film has a lot of spoilers, so
it has lots of.
It's a tricky way to talk about it.
Right. So I liked the film. I thought it was very good. It was different. I hadn't seen anything quite quite as intriguing like that in a long time. Where did you come up with the concept of the self-destruct switch, though? I got to ask that, because that was just very interesting.
Let's not give too much away, because that's a tough one. That's an idea I had in college, actually. The idea, but I can't talk about it because it's going to ruin the.
Okay.
That's the big twist in the middle of the film. What that actually means. But that wasn't actually an idea I had in college. And originally the idea was actually as it would be as a TV series. And we'd see a person that does that for a living, and every season of the show would be them on one assignment and finding one person's switch and undoing a whole, and that every season of the show would move on to a different one. And the only recurring regular characters from season to season is one person doing that, and like an FBI agent figuring it out. That's kind of a mean girl approach.
Okay, that's a good way to put it.
Doing things, social engineering,
Okay, here's another question that you probably won't want to answer directly, which is fine, because in one sense, I think it could be the whole point. Not the whole point of the movie, but the whole point of why you wouldn't want to answer it directly, because it's left to the viewer to try to figure it out. Obviously, it's about the ending. And what I found interesting...
Don't give it away.
I'm not giving it away. I promise.
Okay, yeah. You're good.
But
we're good.
Here's the interesting thing about it. It was one of those movies that ends and you kind of go, huh? Right? Which I like movies like that because it makes you think. On the one hand, people do that deliberately because there's a part 2 coming, which I don't know if that was your intent. It didn't lead itself to an obvious, there's going to be a part 2. I didn't pick up on that,
right?
Right off the bat. But what I was thinking of, the question that it obviously led me to ask is, who was that guy? Because it doesn't really explain it, okay? And
right.
The only thing I thought of was marriage counselor.
Well, in a way,
yeah,
right? Yeah, again, talking about things that are spoilery, but the whole idea is, I think that I wasn't setting up a sequel. I like the I think in films, and this has been something I've done with my previous movies as well. It's like the unanswered questions don't really matter. The answers don't give you anything new. They don't give you anything you need to know. And so leaving a question unanswered, we end the movie where the story ends. The question that's left unanswered, it doesn't matter. And we established early on in the film that it really doesn't, or about halfway through the film, that it really doesn't matter. The idea is that the whole film is really an allegory, and who is ultimately pulling the strings at the very end, at the very edge of it, it doesn't matter. And I found that if you leave a piece of information unanswered in a movie that you don't need for the story, but it's just sometimes better to not answer it, because it does leave the audience. It's like leaving the room after a really good joke. You know, if you give everything, then the audience doesn't have to think about it once the credits start to roll. If the audience is left thinking about it and talking about it, then you're giving them something extra. The film's going to hang in their mind a little longer, and it allows them to put more of themselves into the movie. Once the movie's been seen by an audience, the movie now belongs to the audience, and it belongs to each and every member of the audience as their own thing. That's why I'm kind of against like the whole George Lucas going in and recutting Star Wars, because like that movie that belonged to me when I was a kid does not exist anymore in a way I can consume, and it's very frustrating.
I agree.
Right. So I see that film and they go, I think, this was not answered. I think this, and the other person goes, I think this. And both their interpretations are right. Both their interpretations totally different are right, because that's theirs. It belongs to them. They're adding their own piece to the story. They're adding a piece of themselves. They're making it part of their own, and that's giving them something else and giving them something to talk about. And honestly, as a filmmaker, if you can get the audience to walk out of the theater discussing this unanswered puzzle piece, which again you don't need it, doesn't matter for the story. It's just, and it would just give you a little bit of extra closure. If they're talking about it like it's real freaking life, then you've won. And again, so I feel like I find the film tends to hang better with an audience if you don't give them 100% of everything. If you give them what they need.
Your analogy of a puzzle is really good, because if you've ever bought a puzzle that had one piece missing, and you either want to take it back to the store and yell at them, or send it back to the manufacturer or something, but it frustrates you forever. Where if every piece is there, you finish the thing, you put it in the closet, and you forget about it, and it's done. So in respect to your film, there may be a piece missing that, like you said, people can just talk about endlessly. And I see that. I see that as a kind of a nice tool to, was it done deliberately like that? Yeah.
Well, I mean, one of my big inspirations is the movie Blood Simple. It was the first. And what's great about that movie is at the end of it's a film noir with like 4 characters. At the end of it, all the characters, only one of the characters actually knows what the hell is actually going on. Everybody else has been totally, because of all the double cross and subterfuge, is completely confused about they think they know what's happening, but they don't. They're totally confused about it, and it's never all untangled. Like the film it ends when the story ends, but all that extra minutia is never untangled. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's untangled. It doesn't have to be untangled. Like it'll eventually become untangled. You don't need it to be untangled. But by not untangling it, the Coleman brothers are giving you a piece of the puzzle to fill in for yourself, And as a result, you walk away from that movie really thinking about it. And it's something I mean, it's not like I go, well, this is what I'm gonna withhold. But my instinct is to end the story. I never, what you're talking about, I did intentionally withhold, because it doesn't matter. And it's better. It's honestly better if you don't know. There's no suspects.
Okay.
You have to. There's a whole other person, and it doesn't matter. Like it's opening up a whole other side of the story. It doesn't matter. Instinctually, I tend to do that, where I tend to leave a piece for the audience, a piece of the coloring book for the audience to shape themselves and become part of the process. That's what you're talking. People who are listening to us have no freaking clue what we're talking about.
Oh no! See, this is perfect. This is absolutely perfect, because now they're going to have to go see it.
The story. We haven't discussed the characters. We're talking around an ending they can't know unless they see it.
Right, exactly. So this is actually fuel for people to go watch this film, and which is the whole point of an interview, to promote the film, I think. This is exactly what you want to give them. It's just enough to juice it up, so they got to go see it. Otherwise, they'll have no idea what we're talking about.
Right. And by the way, my wife and I have been putting together a puzzle all morning, and it's driving me insane. So
hopefully, there's not a piece missing.
I keep thinking there is. I keep like this. This piece. And I was like snapping pieces together like as in tomorrow, and I'm like struggling over one for 45 minutes. So that's she's the brains of the operation for here, not stuff. We played Scrabble the other day. It was like 100-2. It was she slaughtered me. It was horrible.
Wow. Yeah, for you as a writer, that's kind of ironic, but maybe Scrabble just isn't your forte.
I could do one thing. Exactly.
I think we got to wrap this up at this point. I know we could have gone on for a lot longer. There was one question I wanted to ask though, and then let's end on this, okay? Since we talked about the missing piece of the puzzle and blah blah blah, is there a right answer, or is that just up to whoever's talking about it?
So in my mind, I have an answer, but whatever answer you fill in is the right answer.
Okay, all right.
I mean, that's as my own audience member, I have my right answer. As a writer, I have a right answer, but I have an answer I believe it to be. But again, like if you have a different answer, but it works, that answer is for your, again, the movie belongs to you now if you've seen it, and your version of that movie, your interpretation of it.
That's fair. I'll take that. My guest is Paul Osborne. The movie is called Cruel Hearts. It is out and about, available now. Please check it out while everybody is stuck at home. Thank you so much for coming on. This was a nice interview. Great talking to you. Best of luck.
Thank you for having me on the show. It was a lot of fun.